Hello, and welcome to Littlecote Roman Villa. I will guide you around this wonderful site and explain its history and what can be seen today. Your tour starts at the information panel by the east range of buildings. It's the first you come to from the car park, under the oak trees. You can, of course, press pause at any stage, so if you're not at the first panel, press pause now, and then restart the audio when you're ready by pressing play. You will also notice that there are some images shown on the guide at various stages, so keep an eye on your screen. When the Romans invaded England in AD 43 in what is now Kent, they soon built roads spreading west and north as they occupied the country. One such road was built here, and a small military garrison guarded the important river crossing. A few timber roundhouses were erected around AD 60 near the present-day mosaic cover building. A bakery and brewery were added, and around 170 the first flintstone building was erected. The villa went on to become a large farming estate, supplying the surrounding area. By around 300, the villa covered more than 1 hectare, with around 60 rooms, 3 bathhouses, many mosaic floors, and several hypocausts for heating. When the archaeological excavations of the villa were completed in 1991, it was conserved and presented as it was in the 360s, and the reason for that will be explained later. You are standing by the huge gatehouse, which would have been 3 stories high, perhaps the grandest gatehouse in Roman Britain. It was built around 290 to 300. You can see a reconstruction on your screen. The long building to your left is thought to have been a stable block. A similar building would have been on the north side of the gatehouse, extending towards the river. Walk through the entrance and bear left towards the south range and its information panel. You can continue listening to this as you walk. The entire courtyard, enclosing about 1 hectare, was surrounded by a high stone wall. The fields that you can see rising beyond the villa were used in Roman times to grow crops. There was open land for grazing cattle, as well as hill pastures for raising sheep. The nearby woodland provided grazing for pigs, timber for building, and fuel for fires. There would have been paddocks and vegetable plots both inside and outside the courtyard. The villa grew to be a large farming estate, supplying produce all over the surrounding area. In the mid-300s, the owner of this villa would have been amongst the wealthiest families of Romano-British society. The earliest building on this South Range site was a huge barn built in the early 3rd century. You can see the 6 stone pads which would have supported its roof. Around 270, the building was converted for residential use. You can see that internal walls were added to create several rooms and corridors, and a large bath suite was built, the set of small rooms to your right. The bath suite comprised the usual set of rooms. Can you see where the praefurnium or furnace was? To its left was the apoditerium or changing room, where bathers would strip off their clothes before progressing through to the tepidarium or warm room, where they would perhaps have massaged scented oils into the skin. The warmth of the tepidarium and the relaxing massage prepared them for the next room, the caldarium or hot room, where the bathers would have removed sweat and dirt by scraping their skin with a tool called a strigil. Next was the frigidarium, or cold room, and then the cold plunge bath. The floor and walls were covered with opus signinum, a type of crushed tile cement, which you can still see today. The bathers would finish by returning to the apoditerium to dry themselves and perhaps apply more perfumes and oils. The bathhouse was like a private health spa, a place to exercise, relax, eat, drink, and gossip. A grand entrance with a flight of steps under a twin-columned portico or porch was added. You are standing by the 2 stone pads which supported the columns. Start to walk to your right, and you come to a tiny building set into the wall. This is thought to have been a garden shrine. Further along the south wall is a 2nd century well, which supplied the earlier villa house and its baths. There were other wells on the site, but this is the only one preserved. This is a good time to discuss what happened to this villa after the Romans left. At the end of the 4th century, the Roman Empire declined, and by 410 the Romans and their armies had largely moved back to Rome. Archaeological evidence shows that this villa rapidly declined in the early 400s. Parts were demolished and the rest fell into decay. In the 12th century, the stones of the villa were reused to create a linear medieval village which extended from where you're standing almost as far as Littlecote House. It might have looked a bit like the one you see on your screen. The buildings included longhouses, workshops, barns, and a courtyard farm complex. Can you see the slightly raised area just outside the south wall? Under the turf are the remains of the blacksmith's workshop from the medieval village. The village was dismantled in the 14th century when the owner of Littlecote House wanted to create a deer park here. We think the flints were reused to build cottages in nearby Chiltern Foliot. Turn now to walk towards the next information panel, which is on the courtyard side of the west range of buildings. You may wish to pause the audio and then play when you reach the panel. This west range was the main residential building of the villa. It had started back in the mid-2nd century, but after several minor modifications, the house was largely rebuilt around 270 on a much grander scale, with 2 stories under tiled roofs, with large towers at each end. The layout of walls you see today shows it as it was in the 360s. Many rooms would have had coloured wall plaster, glazed windows and tiled floors. Several had beautiful mosaic floors and heating under the floors and up the walls. Here at the information panel, you're standing where the main entrance was. There were steps rising up to the long loggia-style porticus, or front corridor, running along the whole frontage of the building. On your left, a set of stairs gave access to the first-floor balcony and rooms. In front of you is the most important room of the villa, the triclinium, or main dining and reception room. The triclinium takes its name from the Latin for 3 couches, which would be arranged around 3 sides of a square, with guests reclining on them and dining off tables. You can see the interesting and not very common hypocaust heating system made of radiating flint stacks rather than the more common ones made of tiles. This elegant room would also have had fresco panels on the walls and a lovely mosaic floor, but little survived. Beyond it, and slightly to the left, is the culina, or main kitchen, added around 190. It was a very special Roman kitchen, with a ledge which served as a cooking range, and smoke would have vented through the roof, via a hood supported by timber posts, an early example of an extractor fan. The kitchen floor had been replaced at least 12 times, and between each floor level they found evidence of the household diet: animal, bird and fish bones, eggshells, oyster, mussel and whelk shells, hazelnut shells and carbonized grains. Wealthy Romans ate well, with meals known to include ham, venison and suckling pig, and puddings of fruit and pastries with honey, raisins and nuts, all complemented by wine. To your left is another bath suite, again including a pryfernium or furnace, tepidarium, the warm room, caldarium, the hot damp room, sudatorium, a dry heat room, frigidarium, a cold room, and a cold plunge bath. On your right are more reception rooms with service corridors and rooms at the rear. Remember that this was a 2-story building, so there was plenty of space for a wealthy Romano-British family. Walk on now towards the mosaic cover building. You pass a very long room, which was a smokehouse. It had a long central hearth, and its walls were over 6 meters high. Next to the smokehouse is a 2-story cottage built around 380, possibly to house the manager of this large estate. This would be a good time to take a short rest and sit on one of the seats by the North Range. Pause your audio and press play when you are comfortably seated. I need to explain what happened here at Littlecote in the 360s. You'll remember that the villa had grown to become a large farm, providing crops, meat and vegetables to the surrounding areas. However, around 360, it is clear from the archaeology that the farming activity virtually ceased, and it is thought that the villa became a collegium, a sort of monastery for the followers of the Orphic cult. Across the Roman Empire, people had been able to worship whichever god they wished, and many cults and religions were followed in the early years. In the early 300s, Emperor Constantine I, Constantine the Great, converted to Christianity, and he used his power and influence to promote Christianity across the empire. After Constantine, the next 2 emperors also supported Christianity. But in 361, the new emperor elected in Rome was Julian the Apostate, who actively encouraged the following of the old religions, including Orphism. During and after Julian's brief reign, many pagan temples and shrines in Britain were restored and new ones built, including the Orphic Hall here at Littlecote. Let's try to imagine just what went on here. Walk a few meters east towards the river and turn left to enter the buildings through the wide doorway. I want you to imagine that you are a Roman visitor to the Collegium. You may have travelled a long way to be initiated into the Orphic cult. You would have arrived perhaps on horseback at the huge, impressive gatehouse. A stable groom has taken your horse to the stable, and you've been guided across the villa courtyard to this spot. You pass through the narthex, or entrance porch, which had a vaulted ceiling and a plastered and painted interior, with windows at either end. Walk on into what was a large paved courtyard, surrounded by high walls. The small room behind you on the right was a mosaicist's workshop, no doubt much in use when the huge Orpheus mosaic was being laid. Piles of unused tesserae and their chippings were found here, all sorted into colours. Once in the paved courtyard, you mingle with the local residents of the villa and other visitors, no doubt enjoying some food and wine. The large room adjacent to the river is thought to have been a wine store. Part of a large 4th century wine crater was found there during the excavation. You can see it on your screen. Walk on to the far end of this courtyard, to the right side of the cover building. You're looking at a cluster of small rooms which comprised a small, intimate bath suite. As a visitor at the appointed time, you would have entered the bath suite along a small corridor. In the apoditerium, the changing room or anteroom, you would have removed your travelling clothes before entering the baths. Can you see the furnace set at the tiled stoke hole in the riverside wall and the hypocaust made of pillae, tile stacks? All the usual bath suite rooms were here. When you were ready, you would have returned to the apoditerium, dressed again, perhaps in ritual robes, in preparation for entering the adjacent Orphic Hall for the special rites and rituals. The Romans were able to enter directly to the Orphic Hall by ascending 2 steps, but as 21st century visitors, we have to return outside the old courtyard and go up onto the walkway in the cover building. Pause the audio if you need until you're standing by the information panel at this end of the building. The Orphic Hall contains the finest Orpheus mosaic on display in Britain and the 4th largest mosaic in the country. It is 12.8 meters, 42 feet long. On entering the reception hall of the Orphic Temple up the steps you can see on your right, celebrants and brothers would have gathered around the sides of the hall, looking through the arch leading into the sacrarium or sanctuary. This remarkable building, reminiscent of the shape of many later churches, especially in the Eastern Roman Empire, has a triconch, triple apse design. The 3 apses supported a central tower, and windows on all sides created a well of light shining onto the mosaic below. It is the only triconch hall anywhere in Roman Britain, and it's the earliest triconch constructed with a polygonal exterior wall anywhere in the Roman Empire by over 100 years. As the participants gathered here ready for the special rites and initiations, they would have understood the various symbolic mosaic panels, although they're less familiar to us today. Orphics revered Dionysus, who was also called Bacchus, the god of wine, and the wonderful mosaic includes panels that are full of Orphic symbolism. They include the marine panel closest to you. Note the cantharus, the fearsome leopards, the dolphins, and the oysters. The 4 floral panels of typical lotus flower design. Do you see that the southwest lotus, far left as you look, is set differently to the other 3, possibly where initiates had to stand during the ceremony? The borders include triple guilloche and Greek key or swastika meander pattern. The next panel is the panthers and vines panel. At the threshold between the reception area and the sacrarium beyond, you can see the pool of memory, which is unique in Romano-British mosaics. You can pause the audio and read more about the mosaics on the information panel. When you're ready, go around the walkway to stand at the information panel at the other end of the mosaic and press play when you're there. The sacrarium was the very heart of this remarkable building. The intricate mosaic includes tesserae in no fewer than 8 colours, white, grey, black, red, orange, cream, mid-green and dark green. Note that some areas of the mosaic, the North Apse and some of the areas to the south, are in slightly different colour. These are modern tesserae, inserted when the mosaic was restored in 1980 and purposely slightly different to the originals. In the very centre of the mosaic is a depiction of Orpheus, shown wearing a Phrygian cap and, as usual, playing a lyre. Again, you can read much more about Orpheus and the various panels in this area on the information panel. So press pause, and when you're ready, press play again. So you have now nearly reached the end of this guide. After the Romans left in around 410, the villa rapidly fell into decline. I've explained that the stones of the villa were reused in the 11th century to build the medieval village over the site, and in turn that village was removed in the 14th century, when the owner of Littlecote House wanted to create a deer park on the estate. In 1727, William George, the estate steward for Francis Popham, then owner of Littlecote, was digging post holes for a fence, and he came across the Orpheus mosaic. William George was very interested in Roman finds, and he notified the Society of Antiquaries of London. Once properly revealed, the mosaic was described as the finest pavement that the sun ever shone upon in England. Drawings, an engraving, and needlework records were made, but Francis Popham did not want visitors on his estate, so he had the mosaic covered over and declared lost. It was in 1976 that the villa was rediscovered by two local archaeologists, Bryn Walters and Bernard Phillips. The then owner of Littlecote, Sir David Seaton Wills, founded a long-term research project. An excavation started in April 1978 with a team of 6 full-time staff led by Bryn Walters. When Peter de Savary bought Littlecote from the Wills family in 1985, he continued the funding until the work was completed in 1991. In 1996, Littlecote House and estate were acquired by Warner Holidays, and in 2000 they arranged for the timber cover building to be erected over the nationally important mosaic. By 2018, however, the villa walls were being overtaken by moss, grass and weeds. Trees and scrub had grown on the riverbank to such an extent that the North Range was starting to be covered. A volunteer group, the Friends of Littlecote Roman Villa, all members of the Hungerford Historical Association, began a 5-year project clearing the site and cleaning the walls. If you would like to help, please email via the HHA website. This is the end of your audio tour. I hope that you've enjoyed hearing more about this very important Roman villa. There's a wealth of further information on the Hungerford Virtual Museum website. Do take time to explore further, and maybe bring your friends and family on a return visit.